Hi everyone, this is Lee Robinson of Ashton Lee Surveyors hosting the Ask the Surveyor podcast. Today we have the brilliant Stephen Pitcher from St James's Place Wealth Management. Thanks Stephen for coming along.
Thank you for inviting me.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. Have you always been in Essex?
Well, I've lived here for 35 years. I've been in financial advising for over 40 years now. I started my career as a financial analyst with BP, but I got involved in financial advising, and I really enjoy the involvement of one-on-one, face-to-face advice, where you're helping clients move forward and get some direction in their lives. In a way, I suppose it's a bit like a surveyor. When you go in, they've set their heart on this dream property, and you just say, well, hang on a minute, let me be your guide. Let me just look at this property properly so that you can make an informed decision rather than just one based on what you see in front of you.
So where did you live before you moved to Essex 35 years ago?
Right, I was born in London, but I lived in Kent for many years, and then went off to university and met my wife and lived in Chelmsford ever since. So I love Essex. It's a tremendous place. So.
And did you bring up your family?
Yes, I've got two children. My daughter and son-in-law with two grandchildren live out in Reigate, and my son still lives in Essex, in Chelmsford. So,
enjoying being a grandparent?
I love it. It's quite amazing though how tiring it gets. Just with two, one's nearly 4 and the other one's just 1. But they can really put you through it. Yeah. It's exhausting.
It's great though, isn't it?
Yeah.
So Stephen, have you got many hobbies and interests? I
have. I certainly like motorsport, and I like photography, very into computers and all this, the AI stuff at the moment. But in the past, when I was younger, I did a lot of cycle racing. And I love to watch the Tour de France and the Giro d'Italia and all of the big cycling events on Sky.
Yeah,
I think that's great fun.
I see a video of you on a boat sailing the other day. Was that your boat?
No, it wasn't. It was. I was invited to go along. Would I like to go sailing in a race? And we set off from Thurrock Yacht Club. The boat was probably the smallest of the three of us in the race, and it's quite interesting now. It gets dark so quickly. We were way behind. I think we had the wrong sail on, basically. But before we knew it, it's pitch black. We're in the middle of the Thames. The tide's taking us in the opposite direction. There are these huge 150-metre dredging boats going up and down with their horns blowing.
This is the River Thames? The
River Thames, yeah, just by Thurrock and by the Dartford Bridge. It was a great experience. It was good fun, but you all of a sudden realise, I wish I'd been a bit more prepared for this.
Yeah, I as a kid, I was invited to go on a fishing boat with my father at the time, and when the tanker went past, the boat, I don't know if you can see it, but the boat went like that, and I was hanging on for dear life. Honestly, thought it was the end of my time. But everyone else was calm except me. But it is very they're powerful, aren't they? Them waves they make. Yeah,
and you just think they're going smoothly and slowly, but they do really churn up the water. So
yeah, I've never been on a boat since. A little boat, anyway. Any other exciting activities you've done lately?
Well, yes, a friend of mine, he rang me up and said, would I like to come and watch him do a trial glider flight? And I said, well, I would, but I'd rather have a trial glider flight myself. So he said, well, yeah, we can sort that out. And it was, I think it was £100. And off we went, and it was an airfield just near Colchester. And we arrived, and this beautiful looking glider on this mile-long grass runway is sitting there. You get in. Once you've got a parachute, you put on almost yourself. And they just say, right, this is the ring you pull if we have to jump out. Well, I did parachuting when I was a student, and it was half a day training on safety. So that was quite interesting. But you're then connected to this winch. in literally 2 seconds, and this is supercar performance, you go from 0 to 60 miles an hour, and that's liftoff speed, and literally the glider just soars at 40 plus degrees straight up. When you get to about 2,000 feet, the winch is disengaged, and it all goes quiet. And you literally float around in the thermals all over Essex, not too far from the runway at any time, but it's really interesting and fun.
Yeah, I couldn't do that. Yeah, all I can think of is the scene out of Only Fools and Horses, where he ends up out to sea.
Right, yeah. No, I was thinking more of Top Gun, but okay.
So you like any adrenaline rushes then, really?
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that happened, this was a few years ago. My brother was a fireman. He's retired now, but I used to go on cycle tours with the fire brigade cycling team, and I was very much the support driver and what have you. And there'd been an event in the Tour de France when I think it was Andy Schleck's chain came off. It was a major part. He was in the lead of the race. And the guys said they wanted to go up this particular mountain. Now, the weather was horrendous. And I'm driving and I'm at the back, and all of a sudden the team are stringing out and it's starting to rain. Then it's sleeting, then it's snowing. And this was a single carriageway climb as such. You couldn't turn around. And I'm in this vehicle. One young guy had an asthma attack, so he was in the car with me. We got to the top. The snow was a complete whiteout. You couldn't see in front of your nose almost. It was terrifying. But we'd missed one rider. Where was he? I couldn't go down because I wouldn't be able to get back up again. And when you're on a mountain with a pedal bike, as you go down, it's so cold, your fingers freeze that you can't operate the brakes. So you've got to get him off the mountain quickly. But this guy's disappeared. So I'm looking down thinking, where is he? And all of a sudden, through the snow comes what looks like a Yeti. He's got the bike on his back and he's running up this mountain. And it was just such a scene. And I managed to get a photo, and it was the shot of the whole holiday. So it was great fun. And I'd recommend mountains and France to anyone. So
you seem to be refusing to play lawn bowls, Stephen. One day you might, in 20 years. So Stephen, this is an unusual pairing. It's not totally poppy related, but as we discussed before, you've seen some pitfalls of people not following advice and not taking surveys. Could you tell us a little bit more what you've seen and heard or experienced?
Yeah, sure. It's very much a case of the financial advisor will often be the first person to know that the client's thinking of moving, possibly before they've spoken to a mortgage broker or found the dream property. In an annual review, they'll say, oh, we'd like to move or what have you. And you just see some of the mistakes that people make that they don't need to and can be hugely expensive. I'm sure you've seen lots of examples where people think for the sake of a few £100, they'll not have a survey done. And they buy a complete lemon. A property with multiple problems that any surveyor with qualifications like yourself would have picked up instantly, and the buyer would have been aware. Now, I'm not saying don't go ahead. I'm just saying go ahead with your eyes open. In financial advising, you see the same. The number of people, I think it's something like only 9% of the adult population actually have a financial advisor. Now, that means 91% of people go it alone. They either rely on advice from the guy in the pub, which is totally unregulated and invariably wrong, with all the changes we see in the budget and knowing how to diversify and construct portfolios properly in terms of the risk that's appropriate for the individual. Just going after the latest hot trend or fad is invariably a disaster, because by the time it's a fad, the smart money's out. The gain's been made. I've
similar what I've experienced is we don't hear the pitfalls or people not having a survey until they buy their second property, and they've learnt from their first mistake not having a survey and have to spend out thousands rectifying the property, and they said, we're definitely having a survey now.
Yeah.
And also, similar figures is that only current research is 1 in 10 has a survey. And a lot of that is misconception of that the mortgage survey is a full survey and it's good enough. And with the current methods of valuing, if the lend to value is less than, say, 70%, they do a drive-by or desktop, so don't even go. And a lot of the mortgage surveyors do not even look into the roof space, where we find lots of problems. So there is a lot, and a lot of this advice is from their parents and family and friends, where it just recirculates that you don't, the bank can look after their money and stuff like that, but it's not like that. Yeah,
I know when I sort of understood what that meant. When you say a drive-by, literally the surveyor in their car drives past the building to make sure it's actually bricks and mortar.
Yeah.
Or they sit at their computer with it raining outside, and they look up on Rightmove or Zoopla and say, "Oh right, that's the average price for that sort of property. That's acceptable."
Where the lend to value is less, there's less risk for them, so they won't spend the money on a surveyor to go and check it.
Yeah.
So if it's like 90% lend to value, then they will send a surveyor. But even then, it's not a thorough survey there for 10, 15 minutes.
Yep.
Where we'll be at property for, anything from an hour and a half to 4 hours, depending on the size and age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then you know what you're doing. You've got a plan. If there are faults or things, you go in with your eyes open, you get an idea of what it's going to cost, and there are no hidden surprises.
Yeah, and you must have a survey before exchange. Once you've exchanged, you take on all the risk.
Yep.
And all the cost. There is a lack of education out there.
Yeah.
So hopefully, podcasts like this will help.
Yeah. People don't realise that the cost to them of not spending that little bit of money to get professional advice. The professional advisor is insured. They're regulated. There's so many things that they have to jump through hoops to make sure that they're giving the best advice to the client, that it's almost insane not to do it. And as I said, so few people actually do it. And as you said, only 1 in 10 have a survey. Well, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But
you wouldn't buy a car without an MOT and drive your family around in it. So why would you buy a house and not have all these safety tests? Crazy. But yeah. What I see often, Stephen, is people falling in love with the wrong house. Is that the same with investments?
It is very much so. People get these ideas in their head. There was a time when it was all about crypto, because they'd see it on social media. They hear about it. Oh, I'm going to invest in crypto. I'm going to put all my pension into crypto. I'll make a fortune. Or there was one that was investing in growing teak trees in some island, some Indian island, and that was going to be worth a fortune in 50 years' time. These are really crazy strategies. At the moment, it's all about, people are saying, oh, should I invest in gold? Gold's had a great run up, etc. There's nothing wrong with having, I call it play money. If you want to buy a hot stock or something you're really interested in, use a bit of money, usually less, I would advise less than 10% of your available capital for your own pleasure and enjoyment. But the bulk of it, I would always advise people to have professionally managed, reviewed, to make sure it hits their key goals. So if you want to retire and you want £40,000 a year as a pension income, plus your state pension, as financial advisors, as wealth managers, we have the equipment, the technology to tell you to the penny almost what you need to do every month to achieve it. But you need to start, you need to get advice, and you need to have a plan. I look at it very much as sat-nav financial planning. And what I mean by that is when you get in a car and you turn on the engine and the sat-nav comes to life, the first thing it does is look for a signal to say, where am I? Well, that's the first thing I do with clients. I identify, where are we? What's your income? What are your assets? What are your debts and liabilities? Really, what is your financial situation right now? And I don't care how bad it is. I just want to know what it is. The next thing you do with a sat-nav is you tell it where you want to go. Yeah. If you don't give it direction, it'll plot the road you've been down, but it won't direct you at all. If you've set the goal of, I really want a nice retirement, I want to retire early at 60 or 62, something like that, or even 55, that can be done. You need to start early, but you need to have a plan. So then what the sat-nav will do, you've told it, or it's looked and knows where it is. You've told it where you want to go. It will work out all the different routes to get you there. And unless you change the destination, you will get there. And it's the same with financial advice. So it's really about sitting down with a regulated advisor, someone that you trust, that understands your goals and is working for your benefit, and really meeting with them regularly, keeping them informed. Because if a client isn't engaging, how am I to know what's happening in their life? But those clients that do, where we sit down regularly, we build the plan, and for me, a client's plan becomes my plan. So if they say they want to go to the Maldives for a holiday, I'm going to get them to the Maldives. That's my goal. And I will do everything to show them what they need to do in terms of saving, investing, directing their money, etc.
Funny you should say crypto. I've had a few friends invest in crypto. They had little shortfalls of happiness, and then it all crashed. And they all invested from advice from their mates, from a little short-term little win, and the hype of it all. Yeah, and they've lost lots. Yeah. Luckily, I didn't get sucked into that, Stephen. But, and it's easily done, I suppose. And it's the same as surveys. They take unprofessional advice from friends and they really know the real pitfalls and the understands of it all, and it's just costly.
Yeah, it's said that for investors, 80% of their success is down to their behaviours. And what I mean by that is when they actually start, when they're consistently saving and investing, literally not interrupting the compounding effect where the money's growing and you're getting growth on growth, not pulling money out, stopping contributions, all those sort of things. It's just vital that people... Well, I'm almost a life coach more than a money manager. If I can help clients not panic at that moment by being a guide, their success is almost certainly very easily achievable.
I must say, you are a life coach, and I know to listen because I learn more by listening from you, and it will be me talking. So if you hear me not very chatty when you chat to me, you know why.
Right. Thanks.
So crypto is one of them instances where it's short-term planning and short-term gain. And so they're overlooking the long-term costs and ignoring long-term planning.
Well, absolutely. It's so volatile. It only takes the American president to make a statement, and before you know it, the market's all over the place. Investing in a properly diversified, what I would call global equity portfolio, which is shares of good, big companies worldwide, properly managed by professional fund managers, is so much less risky than picking a single stock or a particular asset class like crypto. So I would almost always say steer well clear. It's a fad at the moment. Whether or not it ever becomes a formal asset class that's properly regulated, I don't know. But I don't know of a single client who's claimed they've dabbled who's made any money. But I know, like you, I've known lots that have lost money. And it's like, well, I did try and explain that to you. It's about the long term as well. It's not just that short term, because what people forget is inflation goes up and down. And when inflation is lower, it doesn't mean prices are going to fall. It just means the rate of growth is lower than it was previously. So when we have the cost of living crisis, when you look back at what things used to cost and what they cost now, there's a huge gap. And if it's a huge gap in the past, imagine what it's going to be like in the future. So you to have the options and choice going forward to live the life that you've earned and you've dreamed about, you're going to need money. And there are various ways. You could do equity release on your property. You might inherit money. There's all sorts of things that would come up in a review with a client to say, okay, where are funds likely to come from? But it's no good just thinking hope. Hope is not a strategy.
The only way I calculate inflation is by the price of the Freddo. Where it used to be 10p and it's about 75p now, isn't it? For a little short nicest of a chocolate, 75p. It was so long ago it was 10. That might make the cut real, will it? That one.
Well, listen, it's when you go into I do a lot of driving, huge amount, sometimes 1,000 miles a week.
Wow.
And you're going into service stations and the difference in prices, and as you say, things, I mean, I wouldn't, I'm an athlete, but if someone was eating Mars bars and Snicker bars and, the cost now is so much higher. Yeah. But it's just your family shop. It's a lot of money. And something you mentioned earlier about the short-termism of buying a property based on just the purchase price, what is the maintenance going to be? What is it going to cost to heat? What is it going to cost to run? They're all the sort of things that a surveyor will direct you or give you some guidance on. Whereas if you just fall in love with the wrong property, it could be a big expensive mistake. Lee, let me explain the difference between advice and guidance. As a regulated financial advisor, I am authorised and insured to give advice. Advice only comes when I've sat down with a client in a face-to-face meeting, I've done a full fact find, I understand their situation completely and what their goals and objectives are, then I can make recommendations. Guidance is what people typically experience when they have pension schemes from all over the place and they ring the insurance company and the insurance company says, well, we can't tell you what to do. We can tell you what your choices are, but we can't give you advice. So guidance is really what you can do. Advice only comes when you sit down with that advisor and say, this is my situation. What do I do? That's when it all becomes clear.
So you'll be able to work out how much they can invest in a property.
Yep.
With the planning and advice. What I see with customers is they plan. They've got that planning organised and they know what they're spending. But I find that after I've done the survey and speak to them, after they've read the report, that they haven't allowed for the pointing of the chimney, the dampness we've found, or any cracking, or any repairs generally on the house. They've all spent it in their minds on the new settee, the new bathroom, the new wallpaper, carpets.
Yep.
And they're not thinking about the investment of the nuts and bolts of the property.
Absolutely. That very issue of DIY renovations, they think they can do it themselves, is very similar to when we see DIY investing. What people forget is that, and I had this recently, somebody was thinking about redoing their electrics, and it was one of your guests, Bradley May of BTM Solutions. My daughter and son-in-law were moving into a new house. It was about a 50-year-old house, and I went to see it, and I opened this cabinet, and there was the oldest consumer unit I've ever seen. This thing was crying out to tell me it was going to burst into flames and burn the house down. Now, had that not been replaced professionally with a proper certificate, I very much doubt if their home insurance would have been valid. So it was a case of getting Bradley in. He's a professional tradesman, did the job, did a beautiful job. I now don't have to worry because it's done. It's got circuit breakers in. When you've got two small grandchildren, goodness knows what's going to happen with plug points, so or plug sockets. But now that's all taken care of and not a problem.
Yeah, your family's safe.
They're safe. It's the same with DIY investing. A lot of people assume they can outperform professional fund managers. They don't have access to the information. They think they can read it in the newspaper. Well, forgive me, but if journalists have got it, the fund managers acted on it a week ago. And as a professional financial advisor, my clients have had the benefit of that. Whereas DIY investing, they tend to jump in and out of stuff. The transaction costs are high. It's not often that you meet people who have done particularly well. In fact, in 40 years, I was thinking about this the other day. I think there have been 4 occasions, 4 out of thousands of meetings, from boardrooms to site cabins to living rooms to kitchen tables, when I've actually walked out of a meeting and thought, wow, that person really knows what they're doing. Usually there's a gap. There's something they haven't thought about. It might be investing relating, it might be protection, the business might be vulnerable in certain areas. But sitting down with a regulated financial advisor can make a massive difference to your understanding and your risk exposure.
You touched on insurance, and where insurance affects surveying, or a customer not having a survey and just have the mortgage survey, is if they don't have a building survey and there's a defect and they go to claim on the insurance after they've moved in. If the insurance company deem that the defect was there before they bought the property, because they didn't have a survey, it null and voids the claim. Wow. So the notion of that if you've got any defects once you've moved in, you can claim on insurance and get them fixed, you can't.
Right. Well, people need to know that. That is crucial.
And and it's not widely known.
Well, what I come across all the time is when I talk to people who say, I've got all these pensions scattered all over the place. When we write off to each of the providers, which we have to do, and we ask them typically 24 technical questions. We want a history of every premium that's ever been paid. We want to know the charges, the penalties, the fund choice, and which funds they're actually in and which they could have been in. When we get all that information, we either find that the client is in funds that are totally inappropriate for their risk profile, i.e. they're too risky for somebody who's older and far more cautious, or they're in the default fund that somebody suggested they tick 30 or 40 years ago, and they've been stuck in it ever since. Literally, it's like driving with the handbrake on. You wouldn't drive your car with the handbrake on, would you?
No.
It'd be ridiculous, but that's what we see. And if they just had a regular review, and a lot of these companies, they don't have sales forces or advisor forces anymore. So literally, you're on your own.
I suspect people would have these reviews if they needed it or they know it would benefit them, but there's not enough information out there, same as the surveys, the benefits and the pitfalls. Yeah,
well, I'm doing my best to sort of promote a review and sitting down. It's so important that people have that for their own peace of mind. But our recent research through St James's Place has found that people with a financial advisor are on average £47,000 better off in retirement through the advisor. So it's a case of the stats are there, the evidence, research across thousands of people with and without advisors. Just take that hour to sit down and really confess, this is our situation, what do we do? And there's always something, I didn't think of that. Or very often people find with an advisor they can retire earlier than they thought they could.
Oh, that's a good benefit.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
We can answer the question, how much is enough? They assume a number that is way beyond what they really need for their lifestyle and what they want to do. And, yes, we're all living longer, but from the age of 60, on average, you only have 1,000 weeks of healthy living. People think 1,000 weeks. Well, that's 20 years. That'll take from 60 to 80. But it's quite amazing how many, certainly in the UK, I think it's the World Health Authority says that most men around about the age of 70 have a critical medical condition that starts to slow their mobility and the quality of life. In America, I think it's around about 66, but in the UK, I believe it's 70. So you haven't got long. If you're going to enjoy this, you've worked for 40 years, you've done all that commuting, that stress. If you really want to do those things, you need to plan them. Otherwise, the time will go.
Stephen, in our industry, we see customers ignore red flags. In our reports, we have a traffic light system, and customers sometimes don't even read the reports. They just do it to tick a box because they've been told to do it, and so they're just ignoring the advice basically. So, do you experience that?
We do. It tends to be a case of, because people try and do it themselves or ignore engagement, and by that I mean don't have regular reviews, etc. When something traumatic happens, whether it's a pandemic or tariffs introduced by an American president that causes markets to be extremely volatile, they don't really know how that's going to affect them, and they panic and they overreact. And we often get phone calls from clients who are justifiably worried and anxious because they're not always aware of what we're doing behind the scenes to protect their capital. And that volatility can, in many cases, be a really good thing for long-term investors. And what I mean by that is the market's going up and down, and the investor assumes it's all woe and, oh, this is terrible, etc. But if you're a regular investor, that money going in every month, if the market is lower, your £500 or £1,000 a month is actually buying you more units in the fund. So over a long period, and assuming the fund is growing, which is what we get paid to make sure it does, those units that you bought at the low point are actually showing you the most profit. And you don't know what's going on with fund managers. They might be sitting on tens of millions of pounds of cash waiting for a market correction when the prices of the stocks they've earmarked to buy will be a little bit lower, and that's when they go in and buy. They don't want to buy at an all-time high, but they've got a list of purchases of things they want to buy, whether it's BP or Siemens or Google, whatever. If they're at an all-time high, they're probably standing back and saying, well, I'm going to wait till it drops a bit, then we'll buy in, because we believe the long-term future of that business is tremendous. And we're personally a buy and hold company. As an investment house, we're normally looking 5 years ahead. We're not day traders. We're not in and out of the market like that. But rather, we're looking to buy good quality stocks that will produce good, healthy returns for clients. But also, on an emotional front, many investors are saddled with stuff that they don't want to sell until it gets back to its price before. Professional fund managers take the emotion out of it. They're very clinical in terms of if it does that, it's gone. And that means you're not saddled with a phrase I used previously, a lemon. But lots of clients I've met, and they say, well, I bought that. It did really well at first, but now it's gone down. And the reality is if they were able to look and understand that business, the business is going down the pan. And they need to get out as soon as possible, really cut their losses. But people don't do that because they're not experienced. They don't know how. And this is the same, I'm sure, in your business. Something that you know is a massive problem. For example, they've knocked the chimney breast out. This is something I found. They knock it out because they think it looks good. What they don't know is there's a massive chimney breast up in the loft that now is under enormous pressure in the building because they've taken away the support. So there's different things that apply.
Tons in weight. Interesting you talk about chimneys. When inspecting properties, we find out the breasts, as you mentioned, the breasts have been removed. and we go into the roof space to see how it's supported, and they're supported either not supported or supported by timbers, or they transferred the weight onto ceiling joists, which are only designed to take plasterboard and a few decorations and suitcases, and they're transferring, and if the neighbours decide to do the same thing, it's been known to cause serious
and those people are sleeping right beneath it.
Yeah, no, I've seen it where there's, they got their young daughter underneath.
Yeah,
right, directly underneath it. Yeah, it's not worth thinking about, obviously, but and that's probably advice from a local builder, and the behaviour is that, I've done it for years.
Yeah,
I've done it for years. I've always done it like that, and then they think it's okay, but in the end, it will show its the ugly side of it. And yeah,
cool.
There's actually videos on YouTube of a small chimney. It's just about that wide, and it collapsed, and it took the whole. It just went through the whole roof, and it went through the floorboards, and that was a small 1970s. Wow. Chimney flue, where the kitchen, where the original boiler would have, it was so small compared to the old traditional chimneys. We're just, it's like dropping a car into your house.
Yeah.
From high end. Yeah. Thank you, Stephen, for coming along and sharing your expert advice and experiences. It's definitely food for thought, and I must book that meeting with you. Thanks for watching. I'm Lee Robinson of Ashton Lee Surveyors, your host of Ask the Surveyor podcast.